At what date was advice on negative gearing capital gains tax changes requested by the Treasurer?
Diane Brown, Deputy Secretary, Revenue Group. Senator, we provide advice on negative gearing, all aspects of the operating tax system on a regular basis and on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so there hasn't been any request for advice?
As I said, we provide advice on an ongoing basis. I think indicating whether we have or haven't been tasked or being any more specific actually would compromise our ability to provide.
Sorry, I can't...
being any more specific than saying what I've said would probably compromise our ability to have a constructive relationship with government.
No, I understand that. So has there been any advice presented, finalised and presented to the Treasurer on these matters?
Sorry, Senator?
Has there been any advice finalised and presented to the Treasurer about these issues?
I think the Treasurer has said he's not expecting any big advice, we just provide advice on an ongoing basis around the operation of all aspects of the tax system.
Okay. So there hasn't been any particular request on these issues?
So, Senator, as I said, it's very hard to be specific about whether or not we've been tasked, because I think we've had this discussion before at other hearings. It'll lead to a game of what are you working on, what aren't you working on, ruling in, ruling out.
Yeah. Now, I'm only asking you because I think the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have said publicly that there's been some specific new advice on these issues in relation to negative gearing in CGT. So that's why I thought it was a reasonable question to ask you.
I think what the Treasurer has said is that it would be unusual if Treasurers or governments weren't getting advice on all matters of the tax system. And so that's, part of him doing his job.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't think it's an unreasonable line of questioning. I'm just trying to get to
and I'm just telling you that it's a matter of, I think there's been a view by some that there's a single piece of advice, and what I'm trying to say to you is that it's a matter, and what Ms Brown has said is it's essentially an ongoing role.
Yeah, I get that. Of course,
between the Treasury and Treasurer.
Of course, we'll be worried. We'd be worried if it wasn't. So, the Treasurer has said publicly, though, Minister, which might be helpful for all purposes here. He said recently, quote, "We haven't been convinced that would have that being changes, I imagine, would have positive consequences for supply," end quote. So I'm just wondering if that's a reflection of what Treasury's advice is. I assume it must be. And I'm seeking some...
Yeah, I've got that quote. I think it's primarily a supply challenge. We've made that clear in a lot of different ways. And one of the reasons why we're not going down the path of changing the negative gearing arrangements, abolishing negative gearing or abolishing the capital gains tax discount is because we haven't been convinced that that would have a positive consequences for supply.
I think and I would agree with that. So I'm asking Treasury whether that's based on their advice.
Senator, there's an FOI that was released on the 1st of November.
I haven't seen that, sorry.
Yep, FOI 3751. In there, advice was in accordance with FOI laws released, and that advice says there are a number of tax settings that affect demand for and supply of housing. However, there are a range of other factors that have a more significant effect on the housing market than tax, such as the planning and zoning system, construction sector capacity and interest rates. I think that's consistent with what the Treasurer has said.
Okay. So, is this matter now considered to be resolved by Treasury?
The government has announced it's not making any changes to negative gearing.
But you would expect the Treasury to continue to brief the Treasurer on matters around the operation of the tax system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that advice, so you're referring to advice in an FOI?
Yes.
Right. That you provided to a citizen?
Yes, all our FOIs are released publicly. I think in response to a journalist. It's given to the journalist, and then all of the FOIs are disclosed on a disclosure log on the Treasury website. So it is publicly available to everybody.
Okay. So, as far as you're concerned, that matter has been concluded for the short term. I was just confused that on one hand you're saying you can't go into advice, then on the other hand you can say this is the advice. So
Only because it's on the public record, Senator.
okay, so because it's come out through an FOI, you're happy to talk about it.
I read out what was on the document that was released publicly.
Okay, I'm just trying to work out what the standard is in the Treasury at the moment, because clearly we had a discussion earlier. You weren't here, Ms Brown, but you may have seen it, or maybe you had other things to do. But there was a
No, everyone's just been waiting in that room.
Well, not sure people are doing
For a committee that's very focused on productivity, there wasn't a lot of productivity happening inside of the building.
Look, I don't like to make assumptions about what other people might be doing. Safer that way. So there was a discussion, Ms Brown, about the quality of a public interest immunity claim that was made by the Treasurer. Effectively, the Information Commissioner found as part of a separate process that perhaps wasn't commercial in confidence. So I guess I'm just wondering what sort of standard we're working on here in terms of how Treasury is going to be engaging with this committee and more broadly, because it seems to me that if information is exposed by a journalist or by the Information Commission, then you talk about it, but otherwise it's all very secretive.
Well, I think it's a pretty standard practice, as far as I've been in the Senate, that matters, you can ask about whether advice was provided, whatever, but going to the contents of that advice and what the advice specifically was has not been something that's been, open to the scrutiny of the committee.
Okay.
I think that's how it's operated. But obviously, if there's been an FOI and material has been found to, should be released under the requirements of the FOI Act, then that information is public.
So the FOI advice is dated 6 September, is it?
The QTB that you're referring to, QB 24000030, is dated the 6th of September, yes.
Okay, and so you're confident that when the Treasurer made those statements about changes to negative gearing and CGT being bad for supply, bad for housing generally, that it's linked in part to this advice?
You'd have to. I think you're asking me to read the Treasurer's mind. It is consistent with what the Treasurer said, but I wouldn't presume to be able to read his mind.
Was that something that you can take on notice as the Minister representing?
So you want me to take on notice?
Well, I just want to know whether that statement is based on Treasury advice. I don't think it's a...
Well, it would be informed.
Nasty question or anything.
It would be informed by advice from Treasury, and I presume others, for example, in the housing sector and other stakeholders. Of course, it would be informed by advice from others.
So you happy to? So is that your answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when the PM said that negative gearing questions were not terribly clever to Ms Carvelis on the ABC on 19 September, he was already in receipt of that advice, wasn't he, from Treasury?
So we give advice to the government, as I said, on an ongoing basis, and there could be various reasons for which that advice is provided. I think the Treasurer has said he gets advice on negative gearing annually in relation to the Tax Expenditure Insight Statement. We will provide meeting briefs that would include commentary on what people have said, and similarly we provide these type of briefs which often reflect information that will help the Treasurer to address questions that people are likely to answer.
What about the Prime Minister? Certainly. Do you provide advice to the Prime Minister, and you do it on a regular basis?
His department provides him his advice. The Treasurer may have provided our advice to the Prime Minister, but I don't ordinarily...
You haven't provided it to him directly. Has Treasury provided this advice to the Prime Minister or his department directly?
So we don't ordinarily deal directly with the Prime Minister.
So
Okay.
that wasn't my question.
Well, I think it was. It was.
So you
That's
have to
not.
watch-
Treasury
you
does
don't-
not provide advice to the Prime Minister.
So on this occasion it didn't happen.
Well, it doesn't normally happen. Treasury provides
But did it
advice
happen
to
this
the
time?
Treasury provides advice to the Treasurer. PM&C provide advice to the PM. That's how it works.
So it didn't happen this time.
What didn't happen this time?
I'm wondering whether this negative gearing and CGT advice was given directly from the Treasury to the Prime Minister or his department.
So the Treasury hasn't provided any advice to the Prime Minister.
Or his department.
We probably had, well, I don't think we advise his department.
So you didn't provide it to the department.
Provide what?
The negative gearing and CGT.
There is information sharing between departments
This
as
is
a
as clear as
routine.
mud. I'm just trying to get a straight answer.
I think
Well, we're trying to give you the straight answer.
Okay.
Like, it just
What is
seems to
sharing?
me that you don't understand how the administrative orders operate. Like, Treasury briefs the Treasurer, PM&C brief the Prime Minister. There might be information exchange between the Treasury and PM&C on certain matters, and then that feeds into advice the Prime
Sounds like
Minister
it was
gets.
given to the Prime Minister's department.
Okay.
I don't know what you're
I'm
talking
just
about.
sharing the call
It's getting
in
madder and
10-minute
madder.
blocks.